They are now on campus, and on Friday night and Saturday night they will be performing Bird's Suite with a variety of other people, some of whom are sitting in this room, others on campus, at 7 o'clock on Friday and Saturday in Grammar Theater. So please come and join us for that. Think of this as your warm-up for that event. But when we first started talking about this performance and bringing the company here, one of the things we were really interested in doing was thinking about this piece, particularly in how gender-related and how it all fit together. And so we thought a brown bag would be a perfect time to do that. And I think the other thing is for us to be thinking about generally as we imagine dance on this campus and actually begin to have dance on this campus in an institutionalized way as opposed to all of the work that all of our students have been doing on their own for so many years. It's a space where, number one, we have a lot of female-bodied individuals working and doing amazing things, but also a space where we're celebrating different kinds of knowledge. Embodied knowledge and embodied knowledge and lived experience. And that's a different thing than we often do on our campus. So often we're in our heads in our classrooms and we don't respect bodies and movement as a site of knowing and being in the world. And so I think this is an important step for us as a community to respect and teach and train and celebrate those kinds of knowing in concert with all of our mental knowing. So keep all of that in mind as we have our brown bag today. And Cristina Serna is going to introduce our.
And then also there's flyers for those of you who might not have gotten all this. We'll circulate for the show this weekend. So yeah, thank you very much for those words, and I just wanted to say a few words just by way of introducing our three guests who are part of our artists and also like creative directors, right, of creating this piece that they're offering to us this weekend. So Mary already introduced a bit Tanya, but I'll say a bit more about Tanya. As she mentioned, artistic director of the New York-based company Sogono, and she's also been part of many more other types of collaboratives and teaching efforts that she's together with the Sogono company member Mariko Endo Reynos. She's also taught Buto dance in Manhattan and in a number of campuses. Tanya received her MA in dance from NYU and PhD in dance from Temple University, and now contributes to our curriculum in global dance at Colgate. Micaela Gardner is a dancer, choreographer, and native of the Southwest. Her focus has been solo live works, solo dance film, and sweep and sight dance, combining an expressionist tradition with contemporary urban and modern dance. So we're excited to see the work that these three women have are contributing and bringing together for us. Micaela has also co-directed the Temescal Art Center in Oakland for more than 10 years and has been a guest artist in Middlebury College and the New Mexico School for the Arts, where she's currently in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Dages Juvelier Keates is also a performer and has attended the Interlochen Arts Academy and received a BA at Bard College. Dages is a member of the company Sogono as well and has recently danced for Noemi LaFrance, choreographed a music video for Ephraim Life Sentence, and played a role in The Art of Dreaming. Keates is also an MA candidate at the Gallatin School in NYU, where she researches the intersection of religion and performance. Right, so all of the different knowledges here, both embodied and in terms of the study that I think are represented for us and that we will be able to see this weekend. So we wanted to hear from the three of you about this project that you all have been working on.
So I'll start. Thank you all for being here. I'm really happy to see so many faces. Some I know, some I don't, which is great, bringing new people. So a couple of things. The piece is called Bird Suite, and it is a number of pieces. It's 4 different pieces, and it's really a progression of maturity through the pieces. And the first piece was actually made in 2005, and Christine Coleman and I made that, started to make it in 2005, and it's kind of evolved since then. There's 2 more pieces, Flamingo, Flamingo, and then Ain't No Swan Lake, which you'll see a clip of right now. And then the final piece, what did we call it? Nevermore. No, we called it Night Shore.
Night Shore.
After Crow. But it's dealing with the crows or ravens, and it was really a good fit to work with Cristina and Serna on this because Her research is about, some of her research is about trickster mythology, and that played into our work. But just overarching, I was very interested in birds because of that othering quality, and also this kind of play that we, in the 50s particularly, called women birds. And what is that othering of women, and that sort of alien space that women occupy, or femininity occupies. And then as these pieces progressed, particularly with Ain't No Swan Lake, I was really looking at competitiveness of gender expression. So that kind of thing when you walk into a room and size up, what are you? Like that, all those layers of play that we have in our expression and our performance of gender, and it played out. And we also came after the Black Swan, but I was working on this first, but it was kind of in the milieu, right, of what's going on, and that play of violence, aggression, who's allowed to be aggressive, who's allowed to be self-possessed, who's allowed to be vulnerable, who's allowed to be beautiful, what is beauty, all of those layers of things. And certainly, you know, the ballet idiom, that hierarchy had flowing very femmy, but there's lots of play of what that is. So I just want to show a small clip of it and then turn it over to these two fantastic collaborators. And I also will say everything I do is collaborative, everything comes out of the dancers, and I mean, they're not just dancers, they are creators. Right, so we're all working together, and I look at myself as a director trying to move things, move the energy in the room, but it's all of these people and their own stuff that comes into it. So it's everybody creating it. So let me just show you a short clip, and then we can talk more. All right, so, and this is Dages in the front, and Aaron over there. we'll end it there. But so with that, I want to give it to you to talk about more of a theoretical background on what we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah?
So I wonder what it is we see when we look at these people performing something. Because it's a performance as a piece of dance theater, but it's also kind of a heightened version of what we're performing in everyday life. And gender is something that is performative. Gender is comprised of these everyday, repeated, rehearsed acts. And they're not acts that we necessarily have choice around. They're social and cultural in origin, but we deconstruct that inside of a dance piece. So it gives us a place to reflect a little bit on what we see when we see a group primarily of cisgendered, able, athletic, technically trained, feminized bodies together. What is that? What do we see when we see these bodies move? And what is the role of this person behind the bar? How do we understand this person's gender? How do we understand this person's role? What is the function of their gaze and their action? And what do we assume about the gaze of the audience? Who are we performing for? So there's gaze, as Tanya mentioned, deployed within the work where we're policing each other and disciplining each other and really constantly in evaluation and competition, but there's an assumption of an external gaze. So whose gaze is that? And there was a film theorist and scholar who spoke, her name was Laura Mulvey, and she spoke a lot about the male gaze. And so what is it we're assuming in the performance for the male gaze? What is femininity as a performance? What is masculinity as a performance? What are female masculinities as performances? What is it that we're embodying when we present ourselves as such? I guess I wanted to speak a little bit about the theories of Judith Butler. She seems like an important theorist to bring to the table here because she talks a lot about bodies that matter, and how gender is performed. So, go to my notes. So, Butler comes in this postmodern moment, as does this piece. You know, this work is not really based in a modernist dance tradition. We're drawing on all kinds of stuff. It's eclectic, and it's an assemblage of performance techniques. And in this postmodern moment, there's a question about an emptied out subject. What is subjectivity? What is the self? What are we expressing? How is power moving through our experience of being embodied organisms? And one of the things that Judith Butler alerts us to is the fact that sex is already gendered, and gender is always a reflection of our cultural milieu. So from culture to culture, we produce binaries differently, but these binaries are produced culturally and then inscribed on what is natural. We think that there is such a thing as a night and a day, as spirit and matter, as male and female, and that these are distinct oppositional others, and that that's a natural thing, when in fact Butler is alerting us to the point that we are constantly reinterpreting, reimagining, and reconstructing these binaries. And then these binaries come into being through reiterations, through gestures, behaviors, postures, the same way for dancers, right? If you look at a dancer's feet, they're horrible and disgusting, because after a constant turning on the balls of the feet, you get these calluses, and the calluses weren't natural, but they accrete over time. Or I feel like we'll see in our generation in 40 years, all of our postures are going to be like, because this is a repeated action, and that repeated gesture, that repeated behavior eventually changes the structure.
Everybody just said it.
What fun. So much the same way, in our unspoken physical culture of gendering, we naturalize these performances. Butler calls these styles of the flesh, which congeal over time. That's really sexy. and you notice it in yourself too. Like, I'm sitting here with my legs crossed. This feels like a very natural position. You see a lot of the cis women in the room because we've been taught from a very early age. Keep your legs crossed. Close your legs. You know, keep it private. And we all have millions of these tiny little acts of disciplining that we've internalized and we've been rehearsing for our entire lives. It's the first question people ask, you know, are you pregnant? Boy or girl? and the internalization of our cultural ideas about what those genders mean from within a patriarchal structure, where genders really do have different symbolic value. This has an impact on us and on our parents' psychology and what's introjected into us from before conception. So our bodies have inherited this material in a way that's physical, and all matter is physical, right? But it's also psychological, it's chemical. And we are these archives of our bodies, our families' bodies, their experiences, and that's what you are seeing when you're seeing dance being performed. You're seeing my parents' histories, your parents' histories, all the way back. What happens when we're all in a room together? Something is happening. It's fleeting, it's ephemeral, it's gone. There's no object that's created, but there is a shared affect that we're experiencing. And so it gives us a place to really start to pull apart and deconstruct assumptions about what is natural and what's really, what it is we think we're really seeing when we're seeing the performance of gender. Keep going? Okay. Right. Heterosexuality. So heteronormativity, right? The assumption, I think, especially when you're looking at the kind of history of female performance in Western theatrical culture, there's an aspect of this to me that really makes me think of an article written in 1929 by a psychoanalyst named Joan Riviere, who wrote a paper on womanliness as masquerade. And it really sets the stage for all of these future, it sets the stage for RuPaul, you know, and for us to think about drag and what is the performance of hyper-femininity, of hyper-masculinity. Can cisgender women perform drag? Are we performing drag? We're in these kind of, these fetishized objects, the high heels you see, which are both extremely sexy, but also really unmanageable and uncomfortable. You see Mariko freak out when she can't get it off her foot. This heightened binarism between the chiffony, flowy, and the pointy, sticking heels, and how we deploy these different props of femininity in order to highlight some kind of culturally constructed difference. So it's another way that we normalize and naturalize what's masculine, and then what's feminine is this excess. Big eyes, big expression, ultra slinkiness. How do those affects get foisted onto this category we call woman? But it can be any marginalized, minoritized other, right? So here we're talking about women, but you could substitute in differently abled bodies, multiply racialized bodies, aging bodies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I think I'm going to stop there. I want to talk about this for like a year. So hopefully we'll move forward, and then if other questions come up at the end, maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion about some of these ideas.
Sexuality and
the impossibility. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes, humping the stool. Right. So one of the things that we learn from a very early age, for men, it's absolutely inappropriate to express fear or vulnerability. For women, it is absolutely forbidden to express aggression. And so in this piece, we have aggressiveness, we have violence towards each other, and that is integral. I don't know what our time is.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead.
okay. Yeah. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for having me. Thank you, Professor Serna and my beautiful friend Tanya, for bringing us out here. Really delighted to add to the bird suite with some crone magic. I had this sort of elaborate picture of what I might do today, which is deliver you this sort of accelerated time lapse of the sort of interface of the Dark Ages or the patriarch in the creation of the ballet silk, and that Isadora into the 21st century. Essentially, there's kind of limited time. And so, I wondered about what was current, in my own work, in my own dance life, if my work was social enough,
if it was issued in a femininely empowering way, and living and making work as I do in something of a rarefied sort of, nimbus surrounded, this is my group of collaborators, this is the work and the sort of dialogue that we understand implicitly with each other, and what impact does it really have? So looking back at all of it, I see the connection from that early interface all the way to this very moment. The politics in the School of the Arts, where I work now with the ballet half of the department, and what is supported and funded in the modern and sight work and more, really, if you will, and sort of get down on the floor and do a little release technique aspect of the department. So I think that we can look at the history pretty simply with a litany or a lineage of patriarchs who, after court dancing, created the idealized, spiritualized sort of nymphette who never really exceeds the age of 16 in the ballet world, much less procreate or have a period, who sort of floats weightlessly around the stage, being lifted by the men who have the task to do that. Deeply corseted in the bound shoes on the very tips of her bleeding toes, et cetera, et cetera. And so, along comes the turn of the century, and we have Isadora Duncan, puts on a Grecian tunic without bloomers or a corset, and really did express that as sort of the decorseting of the body, the decorseting of the feminine power and sexuality. What we have is sort of a dawn of sexual liberation and the revolution of a sort that then has a sort of following of foremothers onto us now, with some inserts for me of popular cultural performance personages like Mae West. Mm-hmm. So you have Isadora Duncan, bralettes and in the Grecian tunic, and then for me a natural sort of progression might be Mary Wigman before Martha Graham, and her sort of formalized, almost obscuring of the female form to bring forward these kind of iconized, the witch dance is huge for me. And with a very purposeful sort of reclamation of female power and mythos, the icon. In Graham's work, they said she was less about women's rights and more about the rights, R-I-T-E-S, of women. So there was this kind of harkening back to a time that, where we imagined the dreamy matriarchy, or what that was. People contest its existence, or men do, I guess. Right? But alongside moving beyond the sort of home of American vaudeville, a place of people like Mae West, you have this person sort of stepping off of Isadora Duncan and into this hourglass dress, spouting things like it's not the men in my life, it's the life in my men, and sort of really standing on the liberation, maybe, we could construe as created by Isadora Duncan, and going a bit further in terms of the body, and indeed censored. She was on Broadway self-producing, and actually her first play that she did with her mother was called Sex. And yeah, after about a 6-week run, it was banned. And after that, on she went, saying things like, I used to be Snow White, but then I drifted. And her next play was called Drag. She was very much in support of her homosexual friends in the theater and performance world in New York, and that was banned by a committee that had this beautiful name, like Those of Us Against utter badness. So it never even opened, kind of thing. But anyway, on the heels of these sort of things slurring around in popular culture, for me, looking at all of this through a dance lens, I came up through ballet, but was very interested to know and sort of be the practitioner of another language that would say and be what I wanted to be, inside and beyond that realm. So I saw Graham, and I was very intrigued. But jumping years later, I saw what Agnes DeMille did with Oklahoma, and the subplot that she brought against the libretto with dance, shape, and action. So this lives in a dance world, but it comments on the popular culture and where we were and are as women in our culture. So in the case of Oklahoma, she has a sub-story happening in Lori's little mind, who is not written to say, I'm interested to have sex before I think about marrying you. Instead, she goes to this sort of dream barroom scene where the body ladies are dancing with vacant eyes and broken shapes, you know, sort of commenting on their interiority of experience. And indeed, DeMille worked with this fellow who was something of a psychologist. His name was Louis Horst, to develop choreography from interior and emotional experience. So you have something that absolutely turns around and refracts in the popular performance world. When you've got the ballet sylph, who is created and massaged by what we consider the patriarchy, you have choreography coming from the inside out. And indeed, the embodiment of dance inherently subversive to the patriarchal construction of what pretty is and what virtuosity is, etc., etc. After that, for me, as a person I look at and as a dance, you know, sort of nerd, I saw Sweet Charity and I was like, oh! I was like, that changed my life, to see Fosse's choreography again, sort of in that milieu of DeMille's work, but a step further. And he's a person who came up in his young life in vaudeville, and I think there must have been some sort of relationship to the power and vulnerability of these ladies, you know, of sort of lesser virtue. And so we don't ever hear outspokenly in the narrative of Sweet Charity that actually these girls are prostitutes. Instead, we see conveyed in their relationship to their work and the dance shapes that they're making, and the brokenness and the sort of grinding amoeba in that one section of sexuality that, or expressive of that underlies the narrative itself. And so the power of dance to express this counterpoint and this subplot, and to really carry the narrative forward and bring it in through pores and systems that we don't quite, you know, understand or absorb as the libretto, per se. I think after that, for me, I would just like make a beeline to Yvonne Rainer and Trisha Brown and what was happening at Judson Church, which is to sort of pull further away from this objectification. So in the time of Graham, and then the post-war and beyond of Fosse, those people who were making work on Broadway and inserting it into cinematography and what have you, you still have this sort of couch of sexuality. We're dealing with liberation and further commentary. But when we go to the late 60s and 70s in Judson Church, you see with that dance making as much an exploration of the dance making itself, and sort of divesting of the exhibition and interest to become so pedestrian and so systematic in your dance making and your performative experience and that of your audience, that your audience would say, is that even remotely a sexualized character? And I do that around the house all day long, like, is that dance? You know, wanting to circumnavigate the whole business of performance and exhibition as something, again, that we would see as at all sexualized or virtuous, like what extension I have, etc., you know? And I think that in a kind of way, like I thought my own work maybe circled back around on itself, back around on this progression in dance to choreographers that I admire, Pina Bausch and what she's doing, to not only the experiential on stage for the dancer, but the sort of expansion of material and content, and the bringing back of virtuosity, like I can be a pretty and fluid and light dancer, but I can also be like, wah! Because I said so. and it's all part of dance theater, post-modern dance. You know, I mean, I think that it's important to note that performance artists like Marie Chouinard did things that, you know, really brought it into this area where, like, can we even hold this as dance? When her thing was to have the audience experience her very visceral corporeality on stage, like, this is a mic'd bowl and I'm going to pee in it so that you can hear me doing that. And that's the show, you know? So I think indeed the work that we do now with this, the layers of experientiality and complexity and what's happening for these ladies it's real, it's current, and it pulls, into this argument of, well, is even feminism current? Well, I think, is this real? Like, is this something that we have to talk about anymore in dance? And I'm like, the Planned Parenthood thing. I mean, are we really still like scuffling over my right to choose what's best for my body? Like, this is remarkable. So I think it maybe the layers become more and more subtle. But our experience personally in this culture that has sort of subsumed maybe the more issued qualities of like the suffragettes or something, and now it's like the personal is political, and the stories that I come about telling in dance that come from my interior are relevant. I think that I could speak a tiny bit about the Raven thing.
Please.
Shall I just for a second? So Tanya brought me over to make this duet with her that I had a little bit of time to research and kind of put together the bones of. So we were able to work rather quickly last week and kind of block it out, and now I think we're basically happy with having added a duet to the Bird Suite. And looking at that material, I was reading more around the sort of Pueblo construct of folklore in northern New Mexico, and what I happened to notice was indeed the crow and the raven are a little bit different than the crow, but the crow folklore is genderized the crow is always a boy. I don't know that we see in other animal forms in folklore something different, but except for the example of one, I think it was Isleta Pueblo, where there's a reference to the crow as a female, the crow, okay, so these sort of self-involved, laissez-faire trickster types, like whatever bestowal might occur for the world of the Pueblo, like the bringing of the light story that the crow is accredited with, is really their own avarice and kind of sneakiness, and it's just a little bit of an accident that any good came of it, kind of thing. And so you basically have, again and again in these stories, this sort of entrepreneurial character who goes about stealing things. He takes advantage of what is already there. Like they know the crow is his harvest because he's there to eat your crops, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, this is interesting. We want to beat females in recreating or sort of inhabiting a female version of the crow or the crone, and also make a comment, I think, about what it is to age as a woman in our society and what it is to age as a dancer, still struggling against that ideal of the weightless self who does not exceed the age of 15 or 16, has never menstruated, and dances on her toes. And so I feel like we tried to, in the Raven piece and the Crow piece, touch on some of the themology of the trickster and their habitual behavior and interests, and how that touches with the folkloric, and then also comment on the violence, as Tanya puts it, of aging and experiencing a different sort of content and position in art making and in dance making as women looking 15s now, in my case. I think I probably shouldn't go on anymore.
Cristina, is there anything you want to add in, or?
Well, I guess for folks who aren't as familiar with the series, is maybe like you showed us, you talked about like the crow, and then we saw the swans, and there's two others. Like maybe you could talk a little bit about the large story that's being told.
Yeah. So it starts off with little bluebirds. There's 3 baby bluebirds, and it's been many versions of. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4 different bluebirds. But it's playing with the awkwardness and also how we sometimes sexualize awkwardness. So the costumes are pretty revealing, but it's also a play of this emergence, like looking at animals like the birth, right? That awkwardness, but there's a beauty in the awkwardness, which is very much Buto, the postmodern Japanese form that a couple of us have studied here and there. looks at how you combine, like, what is the beauty and awkwardness and ugliness and beauty, right? 'Cause both of those things are a very thin line that sort of pushes back on each other. So the bluebird is very much that. It's cute and funny, but it's also a little dark in that. And the flamingo piece, so I'll just tell you, since you're here, as you watch it, you can see it. But they start off as lawn ornaments, and they have a dream or a nightmare that they end up on a Vegas stage. And there's just play in that of, again, being this like a lawn ornament, something beautiful that's looked at, to turning into what does it mean to embody that gaze, and also the realization. And it's, I mean, people have said that in the progression of the pieces that's like our pubescent piece, that recognition of like, oh my God, I'm a sexualized being. Oh my God, like, and oh wow, I feel things I didn't even know I had. So the flamingo one is really, you see that kind of rising kundalini happening in it, and the play of it, and the owning of it, and the taking it, and the eating of it, and like just right back into like, just being a beautiful statue containing all of that. So we try to see the insides roll out and then zip right back up. So that's the progression of it. It's the bluebirds and the flamingos and the swans are kind of the full-on expression of it, the owning of that, and also the play of that, and the tension that exists between us as we mature into sexualized beings, and we think we sort of ossify into what our identity is, but it keeps morphing. Let us tell you, it keeps morphing and changing as you get older, right? There's many iterations that we all go through, so there's, I think, some vibration between that, and I think the crow characters are more settled into and comfortable with that expression, and maybe even darker because of it. So that's the arc of the whole piece. And that we have done it before also with a songbirds. There was a catbird, diva, aging diva, and another piece as well. And someday I'll do owls.
Do I have questions or comments or discussion?
Yeah. So you mentioned the one story where there was a female crow.
The Isla Pueblo story.
I mean, would that give too much away of like the dance if you tell me like what the story sort of like covers? Like, is it...
Great question. I don't quite remember what that was. I just know I may have written it down in here. It would take us 10 minutes to find it. It was something about Providence and Harvest.
Okay.
I think.
That was the one female that you
Was the one female, yeah. But they credited with things and I think that the Pacific Northwest, there are even creation stories that they attribute to the crow, like the whole creation's like, he made it all because he uses it all.
Thank you so much. I feel like this is a really great, like, getting into theory. We don't always get to do that here with the brown bags because there's limited time and it's complex. But thinking about, you've spoken a lot about like conceptions of femininity and trying to queer, subvert them. And I know like recently, like Misty Copeland's been named like the first like African American lead ballerina in a major company in the U.S. How do you think whiteness has informed some of the bird suite, and how do you think, what would the bird suite look like if we were to play into the ways in which femininity is racialized as well as like made heteronormative?
Yeah, I'll hit that. We had a slightly more diverse cast previously. We did have one black dancer, and I think there was a more of a conversation about race with that. But you know, the cast is majority white, but then we also play with what are all the permutations of that. Some of us are straight, some of us are queer, some of us are bi, whatever that means. You know, there's a mix of that, and also different ethnic identities. Mariko being the one Japanese dancer, and it was interesting because when Dina left. Dina moved, got pregnant, and moved somewhere else. But being the one non-white dancer, at least from the external, like became other. And there was a conversation like when we did this in Philadelphia. Someone was like, "Oh, we really saw it as this piece of beating up on the Japanese girl. What's up with that?" And that was not what happened for us inside it, because we all know each other's layers and sort of drift more. But it's interesting that everything you do on stage reads. From what the audience brings to it. And in this version of it, Soraya, the bartender, as a queer woman and more, I guess, on the spectrum of things, being more butch masculine, I think that was an interesting counterpoint. But I think we probably could have pushed that even further. She identifies as Persian, right? So there was an interesting mix there, but I guess I'm sort of talking around your question. Just because, I mean, with Misty Copeland, I mean, she's not the first black belt. She's just not. And that's something that I think that as dancers we kind of want to keep troubling and saying, like, but the fact that the archive is you know, I think we only see what's happening now and don't recognize the dance history it has. There is a progression, and there's also a progression of silencing that's happened. I mean, Maria Taltic was the first sort of prima ballerina, and she's Native American. So how is that not part of what the archive is? And at the same time, there is that constant policing. Misty is pretty light-skinned. And have you ever seen a dark-skinned prima ballerina? Right? So it's like, why are we still having this conversation? Right? You know, but I think a lot of people are having the conversation outside of the ages of something like, you know, American ballet, or you know, outside of the it's like there's a hierarchy of the hierarchy, and why is it that we allow that to be what the norm is? I mean, there are plenty of dance companies that are much more racially mixed, and also have kind of circumvented that question, and have moved beyond it, but we're having it in the mainstream because, you know, that's still what rises to the surface and what we identify. And to say that she's the first, not you, but that's what popular culture is telling us, that she's the first black ballerina, and it's just not true. So I think we need to keep troubling that question as well. Yeah.
I have a question. Thank you for your really excellent 20-minute answer. So I'm wondering, as someone who's done ballet, I've done pointing, I've done a lot of modern and jazz, and I love all the styles. I do modern more now because I don't have the ballet body, and I don't have time to maintain that physicality, but I still really love ballet. And so I understand sort of the opposition in the historical terms between a piece like this and something like Swan Lake, right, where it was about this ethereal, non-sexual, you know, other bird. But I mean, as we're talking about something like, why are we still having this conversation? I'm wondering what a more, and I honestly don't know, so I'm wondering what a more contemporary sort of, not opposition would be, but sort of like, what's a more contemporary other end of the spectrum? I'm having trouble with words right now. I mean, I liked your example about Planned Parenthood. I think that speaks to me more in terms of like the more subtle policing that happens nowadays, even though we are all supposedly equal. So I guess I'm just wondering, so, you know, you have a piece like this, and what is it pushing against for them now?
Yeah, I would say that the sexualization. I mean, if you look at something like American Apparel, right, where all the models have to be perceived as, you know, they're having an orgasmic experience in this photo shoot, right? And there's a play of that too, of okay, well, who is this for? And at the same time, it's, you know, in real life we're not supposed to be that sexualized, but we are for fashion. And so we want the, you know, the micro mini skirts, but don't actually have sex, you know, or don't actually perform that, or even like, I mean, this is like the whole question about rape and, you know, what. A long time ago, as a massage therapist, I was told, I had a client come on, this happens a lot, but I had a client come on to me, and I told my boss about it, and he said, well, you're wearing something too short. I think we've had this conversation earlier. Are you kidding me? This is not an invitation. But that's a little bit of what we're playing with, of what is it that you're wearing, or what is it that how are you presenting yourself, and where's that boundary? So am I inviting just because of how I look, because of how I perform, because of how I move? Am I not allowed to fully embody my own presence and my own sexuality because I'm afraid of inviting someone too far in? So I think there's that rebound that we were pushing on a lot. And yes, that to answer to loop back, I think that can be racialized as well, because I think particularly women of color are seen as hypersexualized, you know? So I think there is a lot more play that we could have had with this that I wish, or maybe in a future iteration we can certainly do. I think we played more with Dina because Dina was more of the diva in this before, and there was a play between Dina and Dages, right? There was, because again, how bodies are read, already sexualized, and already as an invitation, already as objects of pleasure. And I think we were looking at not reclaiming them, but so much as just daring it. Like, fine, okay, this is my body. How far can I push this without, without enraging you enough that you feel that you need to objectify or subjectify?
Other questions? I wonder if any of the other performers in the room want to share anything about the experience of all of this.
So I'll just introduce Erin Cancella is a dancer in the Swans and also the Flamingos. Monica Endo is in the Swans and also she's in Bluebird. Got her back into it. And Christine Coleman, who initially created Bluebirds with me, is also in the Swan piece. Oh, and Em Ruby. Em Ruby's our bartender.
Yeah, like there's so much that could be said about this show overall. Dages and I actually had a really great conversation last night. I think outside of the rehearsal process, these conversations are very common for us to have. We're really into theory. We're very much aware of what it feels like to be within a piece versus what it really looks like. So that dichotomy and that binary is very interesting to me as a performer. For example, this is kind of a silly comment, but for the Flamingo piece, we're wearing full-on showgirl costumes. And the first time we performed that piece was in 2010? 2011? I'm not sure. It was a little while ago. But after the performance, so if you come to the show, you'll see what it is. It's funny. Being on the inside of the piece, it feels extremely awkward. Even though we're wearing the showgirl costume, for me, with how the piece progresses, it does not feel sexy at the beginning. So being inside of the piece with my internal experience, how I'm using the gaze, how gaze is coming onto me, it didn't feel sexy. When we got off stage, people were hitting on us with the comedy. I was like, I don't understand what's happening. And it took me a second to realize, this is a really fascinating awareness to have as a performer. Because you have an internal sensation of what you think you're doing, but I don't know I don't know how what the gaze is taking from me. So there's a consumption of energy that happens. And I think that has become one of the most important dialogues for me to have right now, in particular in the Swan piece. There's moments where we have a very direct gaze towards the audience. And in thinking about power structures, I feel like I'm in control of the piece, and I have power over the whole scene. Out of all the performers in the piece, I think I'm on the top. It's very much the character that I have. Yet there's moments in the piece when we embody images, which is very much a Butoh way of working, where you kind of withdraw your ego. We might even have our eyes closed, and we're just embodying an image. But I'm realizing in those moments, I'm also surrendering my own power and my own gaze. And that gaze is coming onto me, but I'm not giving it out. And then I'm just seen as object, where the experiences that I have as a woman in the piece almost feel as though they're emptied out. And then in those moments, it's like the binaries, I'm just here for you to look at. And really, there's nothing else inside of me. And then it switches. And I think I'm in power again, but sometimes you're not sure. And I think that relates to your question about what is this punching against. There's an advertisement on the New York City subway about underwear that you wear when you have your period. And they're taking it down because it's inappropriate. So you can see there's an advertisement about getting a boob job, where it's a woman with oranges in front of her breast, or it's a woman with lemons, and she's pouting and she's making a sad face. It's the most ridiculous advertisement I've ever seen. And then a woman next to her holding grapefruits and smiling. So that's okay, but advertising for underwear that you wear when you're menstruating, which sounds really good, actually. It sounds amazing, but that's you can have part of your experience as a woman, but you can't we don't want to know all of it. So that is, the piece really goes in a lot of different directions. The Swan piece, I think, really shows you the whole scope of what women feel about themselves, towards one another, and I think that the presentation of that excess is really what we're playing with at this point. You know, what's allowed to be seen, what's appropriate to show about with yourself, what was being embodied. You know, like, we all, like, most of us have our periods for the show right now, actually. So it's like, but like, so then it's like, but, you know, it's like, God, like, I would never want anyone to know that. I would feel such deep shame. So that's a real thing. So, I know I went in a lot of different directions. But when was the first time we performed this? 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think I went 2012 before I realized it must have been
It's
2012.
Swan Lake was
2012, okay.
Bluebirds was like,
Bluebirds was long.
yeah, way, yeah.
Swan Lake was 3.
No, but let's talk about Swan Piece 4 years ago.
Yeah.
4 years ago, I was 30 years old, and now I'm 34. And I witnessed it at every dancer growing up, and the piece as well is now ripened. It's really ripened. We grow up as a woman, and then this internal growth made so much to the piece. And speaking about classical ballet, I feel like it's like as if man is wishing you to be forever 16, 17 years old girl, skinny, pure. And then men want to keep women or girls to be like that forever. Period. That's done. So, but this piece is not like that at all. We are growing up, and we are so open to this growth as a woman. And that's the real feminine power. And as a dancer, I would like to stick to that direction and then keep expressing that direction instead of staying in one place and, oh no, I'm a pure 16 years old girl. So.
I think also the bartender character too. So I am this piece and as we're doing it now, I think there's another. I mean, because we're on that spectrum of things, I think there's the last image is of the fragility of what the bartender is making. Like this construction, this reconstruction, this kind of like, now I'm going to claim to do it my own way. And I really love that mutability in the piece, that the characters all embody femininity in different ways, and gender in different ways, and sexuality in different ways. And this last structure is just, it's a glass house. And it's so fragile and breakable and so beautiful at the same time. So there's kind of all of that, not just the self. I think many layers of gender expression.
For me, it took me a really long time to actually be comfortable in this piece. I had a really hard struggle with this piece because I'm aggressive. I'm really aggressive. I had 3 brothers, you know, I'm not going to be pretty and beautiful is something that I was so far away from that I couldn't relate, and I still fight with it. Like, I'm just like, can't I just be angry and punch you in the face? I mean, I'm like, you know, like, and you'll kind of see it. Like, there's, like, we have a little interaction. That's how I'm like, aggressive, you know? And it's not like I have to be aggressive. It's just something that I'm comfortable with. So, in the whole sense of beauty and what was supposed to come, like, this whole sexual, I hide my sexual, you know, like, I just, like, just me and my person, nobody else needs to know, you know, like, we have our alone time, and that's it, you know, like, nobody needs to know what's going on, you know, so, in the sense of, like, I've been, like, you know, I'm just Christine, I'm just Christine, and Christine works on cars, and, you know, like, I love cars, you know, I like like really, and I'm seen as like the person I'm with loves my strength, and that is what they are so attracted to, is how strong I am. And it is not because I'm trying. I don't wear like lipstick and makeup. I mean, I just bought a curling iron for the very first time. You know, like I don't. For me, like fitting into this piece, I have like. It's something. Sometimes I feel forced into a situation, and I'm trying to find my way into a forced situation that I'm not comfortable with, and find my strength. Like I'm always like searching, trying to find my strength and my beauty and my sexiness, you know, and like be beautiful in my strength, you know. Like I'm just like I'm Christine. That's it, you know. Like there is no like. I don't know. It's just it's a different for me because I feel like I'm surrounded by such beautiful people that I don't like. That like my dancers, I like feel so outside, but But if you look at it, I'm so inside. But internally, I'm like across the street, playing with trucks.
This is
You know?
exactly what we were playing with, and exactly what I pushed on. Is like all of that is beautiful, and I think we all have that, right? We all have that. What our lines, our concept of what beauty is, and what we are, and why are those two things separate? Why is not each expression is beautiful, right?
Yeah, it's like finding your strength in that situation.
And learning to identify as beautiful no matter what you are.
Yeah, even
right?
if you feel like.
If you don't match up with the heteronormative, you know, hegemonic
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah.
If you're your own thing. So that's a line that I think we played with a lot in this piece, and it was a really interesting challenge as a director to push people, right? Because I got a lot of pushback and a lot of like, I can't do this piece, I can't do it, I'm not. Right? We had a lot of right, but I think that's the interesting thing in making art is how do you embody the multiplicity, and that's what I wanted to find. You know, it was not like here's the silk and we're going to work off of that. It was like how do we find our own internal barometer of what beauty is. When we're constantly bombarded with this image of a different, you know, there's one beauty, and obviously there's not, right? We're all very different, so that's what we were looking for.
I think that trope of the self-hiding of Barb and intellect, you know, is very intriguing to us and to me, and I think I have landed on that quite a bit. That again, in these terms, you start with what looks like the self. And we might have this experience in regular day reality, like, oh, how often do you come here? You know, like, she seems pretty. And then you open your mouth and it's like, run away! Too much content. You know? And so I think that flickering is fascinating, and a spectacle that sort of falls out of that and can go from many different interiors and corners is been an intriguing imagery for some of us postmodern dancers.
Okay, so the question of like what is beautiful is really interesting to me because I feel like I have some of the same like feelings as you do. And what you just said, like we're all beautiful in different ways. That kind of rhetoric is really interesting to me. So I guess I just want to ask like to what extent we have to take something like our strength or our intellect and be like calling it beautiful, like do we have to call it beautiful in order for us to like
Good
call
point.
it valuable?
Right, change that word, right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't know, that just really bothers me when I have to like do that.
Right.
And have
Right,
that
because
be
you
like,
use the currency.
have that like, that
Yeah.
like, it's empowering because it's beautiful.
Right.
Just like, that's not how I conceive myself, I guess. It's like, my intellect or whatever isn't what makes me beautiful. I mean, it's where I get my self-worth or whatever, but it's not because it's beautiful, I guess.
Yeah, you could interchange the vocabulary to be valued, to be. The reason I feel like I've circled, because I've definitely gone the full spectrum, like, ugly, like, you know, shave the hair, dye everything, and like, you know, pierce everything, like, and just like fight that sort of mainstream concept of beauty. And then I feel like because I'm probably 20 years older than you, circled back around to like, no, I'm going to take that word back. I'm going to take that word, and the same thing with even taking dancer back, because it was just like, no, I'm a performer, no, I'm a physical theater, no, I'm an actor, no, I'm a, you know, like, blah, I don't know what I am, I'm a cultural something, you know, but then taking it back and saying, no, this is dance, and this is beauty. And not that there's a trajectory or a teleology that's going to land you there. Please go somewhere else, right? Like, please redefine. Please, fall through and find a new word. I feel like this generation is already doing that in ways that my generation is not and did not. We maybe broke certain things open, but the languaging around difference is so valuable because language is power. Language is how we sort of get traction in culture. And I think naming, renaming, making new words, and all of that is so important. So please find another word. Go for it.
Well, I think it's so current, the actual reality of what we construe and legitimize as dance, what's worthy of funding, and that's part of the sort of revelatory experience I was having at 6 a.m. this morning, thinking that, what is what I'm involved in issued? Is this social and justified work? And then I look at the sort of political spectrum of what's happening at a high school for the arts where I work, and indeed, given its structure with a board of directors and the president who was a dancer and danced with Tharp, and you'd think that she'd have kind of a modern eye on things, but who contributes to our department? And this is who can afford to an ever more conservative and aged group of people who want to see the self. And so when we do beautiful modern works that involve, getting on the floor, her reply is, get them off the floor! It's like, wow, is this 2015? Is this really not legitimate work? So, I think it's still on.
Can I just jump in and say something about visibility? I think part of the issue we're dealing in the currency of the visual, and our culture is becoming even more dominated by consumable bites of visual information. And I think it is important to push back on beautiful as a visual concept, that we need to give a certain face, we want to appear a certain way, we want to trade in a certain kind of optical commodity. How do we value the phenomenological cost? How do we value states of interiority? How do we cultivate our own sense of participating in the planetary in ways that resist becoming a visual bite, a visual product? So I'm really grateful that you brought that up. I think it's important. And this piece, obviously, as a piece of dance theater, we are playing so much with visual spectacle. That is a currency that we're playing with, but it's one way. I'd love to see an olfactory version of this piece.
There's lots of smell in this piece.
Yeah, there is some sniffing.
Smell.
Thank you all for all of these, all of the layers that everyone contribute to shape. For me, just the multiple layers of the knowledge and what you're speaking to, right, from the social context now into the aesthetically, what's the interventions done. Because I think depending on the background the audiences bring, there's what do we take away from. So I think we're in that sense, those of us that were able to hear you all have a privileged, entry into the piece to understand more of the layers of it, which I think for me is it's so important, because somebody coming in without not knowing the history of ballet or theater, right? How much of that do they take away? And so again, how important all that is this archive, and that it's a collective archive, and it's gone through many processes, as you mentioned. And I think I like this kind of circle that it takes through different seems like generational experiences and how things shift. So I really appreciate all just how you allowed us to see the complexity and layers that are brought together, that all of you bring to it, and how it feels from the inside to be one of the bodies in there, right? And to think of what do we in audiences, how much do we see and not. So I think sometimes it's only through a conversation like this that you can see all of that things. So to me, that's very valuable about art, right? Because you can't capture it or write it in one text.
And as an audience, our habits for seeing is what we bring into the theater. So in the dress that the hockey team is coming to, right? Yep.